Listen carefully, chosen one, because what I am about to reveal will shift the way you see every battle you have survived. Most conflicts were never about facts. They were never about logic. Nearly 3/4 of the attacks people face are born from projection. Insecurity looking for a target strong enough to carry its weight. And you, my daughter, became that target not because you were weak, but because you were marked. You thought the tension was random, the betrayal unexpected, the whisper campaign surprising. But heaven saw the pattern long before you did. What felt like personal rejection was spiritual exposure. What looked like social conflict was actually a mirror reflecting what they feared within themselves. And now the evidence is no longer hidden. You have wondered why the resistance intensified the moment you began growing. Why the opposition appeared when you chose peace. Why certain people turned cold when you started healing. The truth is simple, but uncomfortable for them. Your elevation activated their insecurity. Your composure exposed their chaos. Your discipline reminded them of what they never cultivated. And instead of rising, they reacted. Understand this, when a woman carries quiet authority, when she moves with grace instead of noise, when she builds without announcing every brick, it unsettles those who rely on performance for validation. You were not attacked because you failed. You were attacked because you reflected a standard. And heaven has records. Every word spoken in secret, every scheme whispered in hidden rooms, every attempt to twist your character. Nothing escaped my sight. You remained composed while they searched for cracks. You stayed dignified while they searched for drama. You held your tongue while they rehearsed narratives. And now something has shifted. The very people who tried to frame you are being framed by their own behavior. The very energy they used to undermine you is circling back as exposure. I did not need you to defend yourself. I needed you to remain aligned. Because when you are aligned, I fight differently. You thought silence meant nothing was happening, but silence was strategy. Do you remember the nights you questioned yourself? When you wondered if maybe you were the problem? When you replayed conversations trying to find what you did wrong? That was the only moment they had leverage, your doubt. But even then, you did not become bitter. You did not become reckless. You did not become what they accused you of being. And that restraint became evidence. Evidence that you are not driven by ego. Evidence that you are not ruled by impulse. Evidence that your spirit is anchored in something deeper. Many women lose themselves when attacked. They over-explain. They overprove. They overcompensate. But you endured. And endurance is louder than argument. You see, exposure does not always arrive with an announcement. Sometimes it arrives through patterns becoming undeniable, through inconsistencies surfacing, through people quietly connecting dots, through reputations shifting without you lifting a finger. Heaven does not rush exposure. It orchestrates it. Right now, conversations are happening that you know nothing about. Realizations are forming in minds that once doubted you. The mask that protected their image is thinning, and you did not need to tear it off. Truth is dissolving it naturally. Because here is the revelation. When someone targets a woman I have marked, they unknowingly sign a contract with consequence. Not because you seek revenge, but because divine order corrects imbalance. You were never meant to collapse under pressure. You were meant to be refined by it. What they intended as humiliation became your refinement. What they designed as isolation became your clarity. What they plotted as sabotage became your separation from what could never go where you are going. And now the evidence is surfacing. You may not see it fully yet, but shifts are already happening. Watch who grows quiet. Watch who avoids eye contact. Watch who suddenly changes tone. Watch who tries to rewrite history. Exposure does not scream, it rearranges. And the most powerful part? You are not bitter. That is what confuses them most. You are still building, still glowing, still evolving, still soft, but no longer naive. Daughter, Do not mistake calm for lack of action. I have been moving pieces you did not even know were on the board. What looked delayed was protected. What felt stalled was preserved. What seemed hidden is about to be undeniable. The next phase is not about proving them wrong. It is about revealing what was always true about you. And when the final layer of evidence becomes visible, even the ones who doubted will have to admit something shifted in your favor. But what is about to be exposed next will not only clear your name, it will redefine your position entirely. You thought the battle was about survival. It was never about survival. It was about positioning. Daughter, there is a difference. When heaven exposes something, it does not only reveal wrongdoing, it reveals rank. And what is unfolding around you right now is not random correction. It is divine reordering. The evidence surfacing is not just clearing your reputation, it is establishing your authority. Many conflicts women endure are rooted in comparison, not conflict. Studies of relational aggression show that a large percentage of social tension between women is indirect. Subtle undermining, exclusion, reputation damage, rarely direct confrontation. Why? Because the threat is not physical, it is presence. Your presence disrupted something, not because you were loud, not because you were confrontational, but because you were stable. Emotionally steady women threaten unstable environments. Grounded women expose chaotic systems. And instead of confronting their own instability, they tried to label yours. But now the labels are peeling. The very traits they criticized are becoming the traits others respect. Your distance is being recognized as discernment. Your silence is being understood as wisdom. Your calm is now interpreted as strength. Heaven is reversing interpretation. And here is what they did not anticipate. When false narratives collapse, they collapse loudly inside the minds of the ones who believe them. People begin replaying situations, reassessing conversations, reanalyzing reactions. And slowly, the realization forms. She was never the problem. This is how exposure works. It does not always explode publicly. It corrects perception internally first. And once perception shifts, alignment follows. You may not receive public apologies, but you will receive something greater: repositioning. Doors that felt hesitant will open. Support that seemed distant will strengthen. Opportunities that felt blocked will align. Because when truth surfaces, favor accelerates. You endured being misunderstood without losing your composure, and that restraint qualified you for a higher dimension of influence. Many people disqualify themselves by reacting emotionally to injustice. You did not. You were tested in silence. Do you understand how rare that is? The majority crumble under misinterpretation. They scramble to defend. They broadcast explanations. They beg to be seen correctly. But you endured seasons where your integrity spoke on your behalf, even when no one seemed to be listening. And I was measuring that. You see, exposure is not just about revealing them. It is about elevating you. The conflict forced you to sharpen boundaries. It forced you to evaluate who has access to your energy. It forced you to mature in ways comfort never could. You learned when to speak and when to observe, when to withdraw and when to remain, when to release and when to hold steady. That is authority training. The women who tried to compete with you were competing for visibility, but you were being prepared for weight. Visibility is loud. Weight is quiet. Visibility attracts attention. Weight commands respect. And respect is now forming around you. Watch how dynamics subtly shift. Watch how conversations change tone. Watch how people who once questioned you now consult you. Watch how the same composure they mocked becomes the stability they seek. This is not coincidence, it is evidence. Heaven does not expose without purpose. Every hidden intention surfacing now is serving a function, separating loyalty from performance, truth from manipulation, substance from insecurity. And there is something else you must understand. Their exposure is teaching you something too. It is teaching you not to internalize projection, not to absorb jealousy, not to personalize insecurity, not to shrink for comfort. You were never meant to fit environments that required you to dim. The reason the evidence is surfacing now is because you have outgrown the room where the conflict began. And I do not allow exposure until my daughter is strong enough not to gloat, but to ascend. That is the difference. You are not being vindicated for revenge. You are being vindicated for transition. There is a level you are stepping into where clarity must precede elevation. I will not take you higher while confusion surrounds your name. So I am clearing the fog. But what you are about to witness next will go deeper than social correction. Because exposure is entering a second layer, not just revealing who opposed you, but revealing who aligned with you in silence. Hidden allies, unexpected loyalty, quiet supporters who were watching everything. And when those alignments become visible, you will realize something that changes the entire narrative. The conflict was not just exposing them, it was positioning you for a circle you never imagined. And what is about to be revealed in that circle will shift your trajectory in a way you did not see coming. Are you prepared for the kind of elevation that requires a completely different room? There is something deeper happening, my daughter, and I need you to see it clearly. Exposure is not only about them being revealed. It is about you recognizing how I protected you in ways you did not even detect. Let me give you something practical. Think about the woman who was quietly undermined at her workplace. She trained others. She stayed late. She avoided office drama. Yet whispers began. She's too ambitious. She thinks she's better. She's manipulative. She did not confront every rumor. She did not send emotional emails defending herself. She kept working. Months later, when a leadership position opened, the very manager who once doubted her reviewed performance records, feedback reports, consistency metrics. The evidence contradicted the gossip. Her results spoke. The whispers collapsed under documented truth. She was promoted, not because she argued, but because she endured. That was not coincidence. That was exposure through record. Or think about the woman in a family dynamic where one relative subtly planted seeds of doubt about her character. Small comments, half-truths, emotional exaggerations. She could have retaliated. She could have exposed secrets in return. Instead, she chose distance and dignity. Over time, patterns emerged. The relative who accused others of being dramatic was the only one creating drama. The one who called others selfish was the one constantly demanding attention. Eventually, even those who once believed the narrative began to see the inconsistency. No confrontation required, just time. Patterns are louder than defense. Daughter, what you experienced follows the same spiritual law. You were placed in situations where your character was tested under pressure, not to humiliate you, but to document you. Heaven keeps documentation. Every restrained reaction, every mature response, every boundary set without hostility, every tear cried in private instead of weaponized in public. While they were gathering gossip, I was gathering evidence. And here's what you must understand. When truth is exposed, it often surfaces in layers. The first layer corrects perception. The second layer restores positioning. But the third layer? The third layer reveals motive. That is where things become uncomfortable for them. Because once motive is visible, denial becomes impossible. Why were they threatened? Why were they watching you? Why did they need you diminished? It was never about a single incident. It was about what you represent. You represent growth without permission, confidence without arrogance, softness without submission, strength without cruelty. And insecure systems do not know how to process that. Psychologists have long observed something called projection bias, where individuals attribute their own insecurities or hidden traits to others. In simple terms, they accuse you of what they fear within themselves. When someone constantly questions your integrity without evidence, it often reveals their own struggle with honesty. When someone labels you attention-seeking while constantly seeking validation, it reveals their internal deficit. Projection always leaves fingerprints, and now those fingerprints are visible. You are beginning to notice subtle shifts. The person who once criticized your boundaries now struggles with their own broken ones. The one who questioned your decisions now faces public consequences for theirs. The one who tried to isolate you now feels strangely isolated themselves. This is not punishment, it is reflection. Energy, intention, behavior, all return to their origin. But listen carefully. This is where many women make a mistake. When exposure begins, they feel vindicated and begin to speak too soon. They celebrate prematurely. They reveal relief in ways that recenter the conflict. Do not do that. Remain steady. Exposure does not require commentary. The most powerful thing you can do right now is continue evolving as if none of it surprised you. Because truth does not shock the aligned, it confirms them. And here is the deeper revelation. Some of the people who doubted you were not malicious. They were influenced. They were listening to the loudest voice in the room. But as evidence accumulates, influence weakens. You will start noticing subtle reconciliations, warmer tones, softer conversations, invitations that were once withheld. This is perception recalibrating. But something even more significant is forming. The exposure happening around you is not just clearing your past, it is preparing your future environment. I cannot place you in higher influence while unresolved narratives linger below. So I am dismantling them now. And when the final layer surfaces, you will understand something that changes the entire way you view what happened. You were never being attacked. You were being identified. Identified as different. Identified as resilient. Identified as set apart. And what is about to unfold next will prove that the conflict was never the main story. It was the announcement. Because when the next opportunity appears, the one connected to your calling, the same people who once underestimated you will have no argument left. But before that door opens, one more truth must come into the light. And when it does, even you will realize how protected you truly were. Daughter, before the next door opens, I must show you something that will anchor you permanently in confidence. You survived because I covered you. Not partially, not occasionally, completely. There were conversations you were never invited into where your name was mentioned. There were plans discussed that never reached execution. There were alliances formed that dissolved before they could organize against you. You assumed certain outcomes were luck. They were not luck. They were interruption. You call it coincidence when something collapses before it harms you. I call it protection. The reason the evidence is no longer hidden is because I have decided the season of concealment is over. There is a time when I allow things to unfold quietly so your character can be tested. But there is also a time when I step forward and make truth undeniable. This is that time. You have carried yourself with restraint. You have endured misunderstanding without turning vindictive. And now what was done in shadows cannot remain there. Remember what is written in Luke 8:17. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. That is not poetry, that is law. You did not need to expose anyone. Light exposes by nature. And because you chose alignment over retaliation, I am allowing light to work on your behalf. Think about Joseph. He was betrayed by his brothers, misrepresented in a foreign land, falsely accused, imprisoned for integrity. At every stage, he had the opportunity to become bitter, to retaliate, to collapse. But he remained disciplined. He interpreted dreams in prison without knowing it would lead to promotion. He served faithfully without knowing elevation was scheduled. And when exposure came, it did not just clear his name. It positioned him in authority. Your story mirrors that pattern more than you realize. There were moments when you wondered why I did not defend you immediately, why I allowed misunderstanding to linger, why I permitted you to sit in silence while narratives formed around you. Because immediate defense builds relief. Delayed vindication builds authority. Authority requires weight, and weight is formed in hidden seasons. Now observe what is shifting. The tone of conversations is changing. People who once leaned away are leaning in. The same traits that irritated insecure hearts are attracting secure ones. Integrity is magnetic in the long term. What they meant for humiliation is becoming your credibility. What they framed as weakness is becoming your distinction. What they tried to distort is becoming your evidence. You see, when a woman remains steady under misrepresentation, she becomes rare. Most people cannot tolerate being misunderstood. They rush to correct perception. But you endured long enough for perception to correct itself. That endurance was not wasted. It strengthened your discernment. It refined your boundaries. It detached you from the need for validation. And now you operate differently. Softer in tone, but sharper in vision. Kinder in spirit, but firmer in standards. That is growth through fire. And here is the deeper layer you must prepare for. When exposure fully manifests, some of the people who wronged you will attempt quiet reconciliation. Not loud apologies, subtle adjustments, warmer energy, strategic friendliness. Discern carefully. Forgiveness does not require restored access. You can release resentment without reopening doors that were closed for your protection. Remember this. I exposed the situation not so you could return to the old environment, but so you could rise above it. The temptation when vindication comes is to feel validated by those who once doubted you. But your validation cannot come from them. It must come from me. Because the next elevation is not social, it is structural. There is influence forming around you that requires emotional maturity. If you had responded impulsively months ago, you would not be ready for it now. If you had engaged in public warfare, you would not qualify for the calm authority you are stepping into. That is why I restrained you. Yes, there were moments I held your tongue, moments I quieted your impulse, moments I allowed discomfort to teach you discipline. And now the fruit is visible. Exposure is not about their embarrassment, it is about your positioning. But there is still one final shift coming. The revelation that will not only confirm your innocence, but also reveal why the conflict was necessary for your assignment. When that understanding lands in your spirit, you will stop seeing this as something you survived and start seeing it as something that qualified you. Because what is about to open next requires a testimony, and the evidence heaven just exposed is only the beginning of what I am about to entrust to you. Now listen closely, my chosen daughter, because this is where everything converges. The evidence that has surfaced was never just about clearing your name. It was about confirming your calling. You thought you were fighting to protect your reputation, but I was shaping you to carry influence. And influence without testing becomes fragile. The pressure you endured did not weaken you, it calibrated you. Do you see it now? Before this season you were kind, now you are discerning. Before this season you were patient, now you are strategic. Before this season you were hopeful, now you are anchored. Conflict revealed your depth. Many women crumble when their character is questioned. They internalize accusations. They shrink to avoid further targeting. They dilute their presence to make others comfortable. But you did something different. You felt the sting, yes. You wrestled privately, yes. But you did not shrink. That refusal to shrink is evidence. Evidence that you know who you are. Evidence that your identity is not crowdsourced. Evidence that your spirit answers to something higher than opinion. And now heaven responds accordingly. The exposure you are witnessing is not loud because true vindication rarely is. It is subtle but undeniable. Doors opening without you forcing them. Respect increasing without you demanding it. Alignment happening without you manipulating it. That is favor-correcting narrative. But here is the part you must prepare for. Elevation will attract a different kind of attention. When your name becomes associated with integrity instead of controversy, secure people will draw near, but so will new observers. Not all attention is hostility, but not all attention is loyalty either. You must carry this next level with the same composure that carried you through the storm. Because what I am building around you is not temporary, it is foundational. There are women watching you who do not know your full story, but they sense your steadiness. They sense your calm strength. They sense that you endured something without becoming hardened by it. And that example is teaching them silently. You survived in a way that models resilience, and resilience is contagious. The reason I allowed the conflict to unfold publicly enough for patterns to be seen is because your life is becoming instructional. Your story is not just personal testimony, it is demonstration. Demonstration that dignity outlasts deception, that composure outlasts chaos, that alignment outlasts manipulation. You did not retaliate, and yet you prevailed. You did not expose, and yet exposure came. You did not fight for position, and yet you are being positioned. That is divine mathematics. Now let me ask you something gently but directly. What if the very people who underestimated you were necessary catalysts? What if their resistance forced you to discover strength you did not know you possessed? What if their attempts to isolate you refined your dependence on me instead of external validation? Would you still wish the season away? The conflict revealed something else. Who you are when no one defends you. And you passed that test. Not perfectly, not without tears, but faithfully. And faithfulness unlocks weight. The next assignments coming toward you require stability. You will be trusted with conversations, opportunities, influence, perhaps even leadership spaces where emotional maturity is non-negotiable. If you had responded with vengeance months ago, that door would not open. But because you endured, you are qualified. This is why the evidence had to surface now, so you would enter the next level without carrying doubt. So you would stop questioning whether you were the problem. So you would walk forward knowing clarity surrounds you. Let the past be a closed chapter. Do not revisit it to reanalyze. Do not reopen it to relive. Do not rehearse it to justify yourself. It served its purpose. Now walk lighter. And as you step into what is forming, remember this truth. Being chosen does not mean being untouched. It means being sustained. If this word settles deeply in your spirit, hold it. Reflect on it. Share it with another woman who needs reassurance that silence is not weakness and endurance is not invisibility. Stay connected to this space of truth because what is unfolding for you is still in motion. The evidence is no longer hidden. Heaven has exposed what needed exposure. Heaven has corrected what needed correction. Heaven has positioned what needed positioning. And the most powerful part? This was not your defense. It was your announcement. Now rise accordingly.